Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. I want to talk a little bit about the ongoing controversy over the Second Amendment and President Obama's position on this. Now, President Obama's out there trying to convince you that he actually believes in the Second Amendment. But let's not forget that back when he was running for the Illinois State Senate in 1995, he was asked this question: do you support state legislation to ban the manufacture, sale, and possession of handguns? He gave a one-word answer: yes. This is not rifles. This is not sporting rifles. These are handguns. And he was in favor in 1995 of banning them altogether. And he's never given us any indication that he has repudiated that point of view. So let's not be fooled by where President Obama may be at on this subject. And also, I think he's going to have real trouble getting his proposals through Congress. I'm looking at a story here from The Hill. Title of the piece is "Vulnerable Senate Democrats Balk at Obama's Gun Control Measures." They don't like this thing. Here's the first paragraph. "Some vulnerable Senate Democrats are balking at President Obama's new push on gun control, reflecting the tough position many will be in if Congress takes up major firearms legislation." And they've got a lot of these guys are up for re-election. You got Senator Mark Begich from Alaska. He's against it. Mark Pryor from Arkansas. He opposes Obama's proposals. Mac Baucus from Montana. Good grief. You talk about Second Amendment country. I live next door to Montana, and they're as pro-Second Amendment as we in Idaho were. So he's against it. He's got problems with it. Tim Johnson, South Dakota. He doesn't want a one-size-fits-all approach. Kay Hagan from North Carolina, she's cautious about these proposals. Mary Landrieu from Louisiana sound a little more open. Al Franken, the one guy, he's up in Minnesota. He's the one guy that's willing to come out and say he basically supports what Obama was talking about. You know, and I mentioned we talked about this yesterday, that 4 of the executive orders that President Obama talked about had to do with mental illness and mental health. And so that's where we're headed. We're headed in a direction where mental health professionals are going to be deciding whether or not you get to exercise your Second Amendment rights. There's a huge liability problem for them. You know, and others have pointed this out. This is a major liability problem for mental health care professionals. They don't want to touch this. We had that caller yesterday, mental health professional, 30 years. They don't want to weigh in on this. They don't want to get tagged with this because of liability issues in part. I mean, if mental health professionals have a responsibility to warn law enforcement that they think they've got a guy that could snap, what happens if a guy that they doesn't think is a problem, what happens if he snaps? He goes off and shoots up a mall, and law enforcement find out that he was treating the guy, that he was counseling the guy, that he was prescribing medications for the guy. I mean, the liability issues there are absolutely huge. The vulnerability to lawsuits from the families of victims that get shot to death at the mall, they're going to blame the psychiatrist. President Obama told you, he ordered you to protect my child from people like this. You didn't do it. I'm going to sue you for every dollar you've got. That's where we're headed. So if you're a mental health professional, they got to be hoping that something is done here. But it's an executive order. I mean, that's the president. Even though Obamacare tells you can't do it, I went through that yesterday. There are specific prohibitions in Obamacare that health care providers, and that would include mental health care providers, are not allowed to ask you any questions about whether you possess guns, whether you store them at your home, what kind of ammo you have at your home. You're not allowed. They're not allowed to even ask those questions. President Obama, that says, that's my law, but I don't care. I'm going to go ahead and order you to break my law. It's Obamacare. That's my law. It's got my name on it. I'm happy to have this thing called Obamacare. Now I am ordering you to break my own law, and it doesn't look like right now anybody is going to stop him. Now, let's play a couple of these sound bites. Jeff had excerpts from these at the top of the program. Let's go to clip number 6. Let's grab the Howard Dean clip. Now, Don't forget, Howard Dean is a medical doctor, okay? Former governor of Vermont. So he's a medical doctor. He is a medical professional, and he once held an extremely influential position as a lawmaker, as a policymaker. Here's what he had to say about the NRA.
They're appealing to people who hate, and they're doing it by using the president's rhetoric first about the high taxes or whatever on rich people, and then using his kids. These are not respectable people. These are hate-mongering, and they're extremists. And I really do think the NRA headquarters is populated by crazy people.
So that's Howard Dean. These are not responsible people. They're extremists. They are crazy. And, you know, Howard Dean was dead serious about that. Did you hear that? He wasn't making a joke about that. He wasn't saying, oh, these people are nuts. He was saying these people are crazy and they have to be stopped. And so you talk about mental definitions of mental health that would disqualify you from owning a gun. If it's up to Howard Dean, who's a Democrat, who's in league with Obama, then if you believe in the Second Amendment, you know, and don't forget, you know, Janet Napolitano, she said this. She thinks that you and I, that conservative Christians, members of the Tea Party, and former members of the military, that we are a greater threat to national security internally than Muslims, than jihadists, than Muslim fundamentalists. We're the great threat. So according to Janet Napolitano, we can't be trusted with firearms because we'll use it to blow up America. Now, here is an MSNBC host, Mika Brzezinski, and she is saying the same thing about the mental health of people that believe in the Second Amendment.
They are out of step, out of the mainstream, totally out of sync with what's going on in our society. And quite frankly, after seeing that, I think some of the people who run that thing are sick. I really do. I think they are sick in the head. And I'm serious. I'm embarrassed right now. I'm embarrassed for our country.
Now, again, think about how serious she was when she said that. She wasn't fooling around. She wasn't exaggerating. She wasn't indulging in hyperbole. She said, I think some of the people who run that thing, talking about the NRA, their crime, in Mika Brzezinski's view, is that they take the same view of the Second Amendment that the Supreme Court does. The NRA is exactly where the Supreme Court is. The Second Amendment provides the right of individual Americans to keep and bear arms. The Supreme Court said that twice in two major decisions in the last few years. So that's where the NRA is at. If anybody's out of step here, it's Mika Brzezinski. But notice, she's dead serious about this. I think some of the people who run that thing are sick. I really do. In other words, I don't want you to think here that I'm exaggerating or hyperbolizing for effect here. I believe this. I really think they're sick. I think they are sick in the head, and I'm serious. She says, look, I know what I'm saying is so over the top, you're going to think that I'm exaggerating, and I'm here to tell you that I am not. Now, clip 8, this is Charlie Rangel. Now, Charlie Rangel is basically saying this whole thing is about racism. And he's taken another swing at the southern states. And you've got some governors. We've got Governor Rick Perry. Let me read a couple of their statements here. Let me start with Phil Bryant, Governor Phil Bryant, state of Mississippi. Here's a letter that he sent to the Lieutenant Governor, Tate Reeves, and to the Speaker of the House. I am asking that you immediately pass legislation that would make any unconstitutional order by the president illegal to enforce in Mississippi by state or local law enforcement. Several states have introduced similar measures, and I believe will be successful in preventing this overreaching and anti-constitutional violation of our rights as American citizens. Now, Phil Bryant said, look, the difference here between what's going on now and what maybe happened in the South in the 1960s is back then you had white Democrats that were trying to prevent the American people from exercising their constitutional rights. The difference now is you've got white Republicans in the South that are trying to protect the right of American citizens to exercise their constitutional rights. This isn't about preventing people access or the use of their rights. This is about protecting their rights. It's not about denying them their rights, which is what white Democrats and the KKK tried to do in the South in the 60s. And remember, the NRA went to bat for blacks who were having their neighborhoods shot up by these white vigilantes NRA was on the side of the minorities. We want you to have arms so you're not left defenseless against the white vigilantes of the KKK. So this is not about denying people their rights. This is about defending their rights. Governor Rick Perry has said the same thing. Listen to this. Great statement from Governor Perry. He's been blasted by the media for this, but you think about this guy. I mean, think about 2016 and what we need in the White House, and see if this doesn't sound like the kind of guy. I'm not saying Rick Perry's the guy, but don't you want a guy that's going to send this kind of signal? Here's Governor Rick Perry. Guns require a finger to pull the trigger. The sad young man who did that in Newtown was clearly haunted by demons. Man, the left just completely freaks out when I talk about demons and Satan being behind this or behind that. Here's Governor Perry saying this guy was haunted by demons. Same thing that the president of AFA, Tim Wildman, said. Tim Wildman said, look, Satan drove that car. Satan took over that guy. He's not absolving that guy of responsibility in some way or another. He had opened his life up to demonic forces, but that was Tim's point. Satan drove that car to that school. Satan took those people out. So Rick Perry's saying the same thing. This guy was haunted by demons. He's saying that as the governor of the third largest state in the country. This man was haunted by demons. So here's a guy that takes a biblical view of supernatural beings dead seriously. He believes in demons as much as Jesus did. And no gun law, he says, could have saved the children in Sandy Hook Elementary from his terror. There is evil prowling in the world. It shows up in our movies, video games, and online fascinations, and finds its way into vulnerable hearts and minds. As a free people, let us choose what kind of people we will be. Laws, the only redoubt of secularism, will not suffice. In other words, it's not enough just to have good laws. Listen to this. Let us all return to our places of worship and pray for help. Above all, let us pray for our children. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's a guy that believes in the power of prayer, that believes we need to be praying for children, that the explanation for what happened there is not just we didn't have good enough laws. Remember that guy broke 41 laws that day. A 42nd law wasn't going to stop him. Rick Perry says we need to pray for our nation. We need to pray for our children. And he referred to this campaign from the left as something to use these children as props to advance their agenda. It says it disgusts me personally. Second Amendment is a basic right of a free people. Back in 2.